Well, joining me now, President of Christie Strategies and former Special Assistant to President George W. Bush is Ron Christie, syndicated columnist, CNN contributor, and professor at Lehman College, Miguel Perez, columnist for the New York Daily News, and CNN contributor Errol Lewis, and Democratic strategist, also a CNN contributor, Robert Zimmerman. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Let's start with health care. And maybe the House representatives could unveil a bill next week. Will it have a public option? Robert?
I don't believe it'll have a public option as it's been defined by the president and by the House of Representatives. There may very well be a trigger to a public option down the road, but right now, clearly, there's not going, in my opinion, there will not be a public option. But I think what's really critical going forward is not the debate about a public option, but producing a bill that's going to show it can control costs, because that's really the key to putting health care on track.
What are you expecting next week, Miguel?
I think there will be a public auction out of the House. I think maybe the trigger will come in once they agree with the Senate or they negotiate with the Senate on a final bill. But definitely, I think the House will come up with a public auction.
I think in the surging back and forth between the different sides of the Democratic Party, that the progressives are really making their presence felt. So I do agree with Miguel that there will probably be a public option. And whether or not it stays or whether or not it grows, expands, or gets debated, I think the leadership has got to respect what the base has been telling them.
And I agree with the panel as well. I think that there aren't enough votes in the House of Representatives to pass a bill without either a trigger mechanism or a public option. The devil will be in the details for the compromise between the Senate and the House negotiators. I think a trigger or some mechanism will be in the final bill.
What do you all make of, and it's been of much discussion this week about, Republican Senator Olympia Snowe of Maine, a key player suddenly, and Nancy Pelosi, and much drama has been sort of conjured up over this. Robert, what do you think of this?
You know, she wouldn't be there without the moderate conservative Democrats helping to put her in that position. She's not just the lone voice, but because she's the only Republican, and think about it, out of all the Republicans in the House and in the Senate, she's the only Republican who stood up and has opened up the opportunity for compromise. So she deserves the attention she's getting, and she deserves the stature she has in terms of trying to form health care reform and move it forward.
Some Democrats, however, are resentful of the fact that she is in this key position and making this important decision. It's the American way. She's the only one who held out.
Yeah.
Well, she has the key to an important presidential promise, which is one of bipartisanship. And it may look like a fig leaf. It doesn't look like very robust bipartisanship, but it's the best that they've got for right now. And I agree with Miguel. I mean, look, this is how it works. You know, you choose your position carefully, you can end up being a pivotal figure in American politics. That's what she is right now.
And see, I don't know if I'd call her so pivotal. I think she has obviously voted in favor of the Senate finance bill, but Senator Joe Lieberman from Connecticut has indicated that he's going to vote against it if that goes on the floor, nullifying her vote out of Senate finance. So I think that there's been too much of a play on Olympia Snowe's role. The real devil in the details in this, I believe, is going to be, can they pass a bill that's going to keep costs low, insure a lot of people, and meet the president's promises? And I just don't think that's possible.
Well, that's why you're going to see more of a focus coming up on the issue of tort reform, which is long overdue, and ultimately could save $54 billion in this very expensive production. Also a focus on doctor-patient guidelines that are going to be needed. But I think what's going to be the key to passing this bill is not the public option. It's going to be able to show that you can control costs and bring some sort of protection to benefits to health recipients in the process.
Gentlemen, I'd like to switch to Afghanistan because it really is such a critical issue right now. We saw President Obama continuing to discuss with his War Council, debate the Afghan strategy this week. I'd like to bring up a comment from retired General Richard Myers, who was on CNN earlier.
This is a very important decision for this president, for any president, when you're deciding whether to send more of America's blood and treasure into a difficult circumstance. Having said that, I think they need to get on with this decision here fairly quickly. And
one of the criticisms is that this is too undecided and it's taking too long. Robert, your thoughts?
Look, this decision process is probably going to take less time than George Bush's decision to launch the surge in Iraq. And I think it's very refreshing and important to have a president who's gathering information from every specter. I mean, there are serious issues to explore. First of all, as Barbara Stohr reported, do we actually have the troops to deploy? We only have 48,000 troops that have not been deployed. And so that's a factor. The second issue is, what is our goal in that region? You know, there's a lot to be said for the fact there's the process that Mark Thompson from Time magazine reported, the economic Taliban. 70% of the Taliban who will work for $20 a day for whoever's paying them. So it's important to have a strategy before we pursue deployment.
Right.
Problem is, everybody in the world has a position on what to do in Afghanistan except the President of the United States. And we keep waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting.
Because
and
who's the one with responsibility for sending troops into battle. He's the one who's got
what
the
kind
facts.
of message are we sending to the rest of the world leaders when we're hesitating about what to do with Afghanistan? How do we get them to commit to Afghanistan if we keep waiting and waiting and waiting for ourselves
Our
to
message
decide?
that we're sending is that we're going to make a strategic decision about how to destroy Al-Qaeda.
The message that we're sending is that we're trying to get out of there, and the president doesn't have an excuse.
It's not simply about waiting around in Washington to figure things out. You know, there is this thing called the Afghanistan government, which is under a lot of pressure. The UN has found that the elections were corrupt. They may have to redo them. This is about hearts and minds. This is about the people over there. It's about the military situation on the ground. You know, there are times where the situation has to develop some clarity, and I think that's what the president seems to be waiting for.
No, the lack of clarity is with the President of the United States himself. He unveiled a policy in March of this year. He unveiled a policy in August of this year where he said we had to defeat the al-Qaeda network, we had to defeat the Taliban, we need to put the U.S. troops in there to get it done. Now the president's holding back and saying, well, you know what? Despite what I said before, we need to reevaluate. And the thing, Kitty, to go to Miguel's point, where we look weak, Gordon Brown committed 500 more troops from Great Britain. Gordon Brown's in a very, very difficult political situation right now, but yet he recognizes the threat for what it is.
Look, we could pursue foreign policy through soundbite. We went through 8 years of taking on the evildoers, and we saw the results of it. We have to have a policy that's going to take on not just Al-Qaeda, but their terrorist allies.
Gentlemen, let's take a quick break, get right back to it. We'll be right back in a minute.
If you're like most, your retirement dreams have seen better days. But with nearly 130 years of financial experience, the principal knows a few ways to help perk things up. With our helpful tools and resources, we can point you in the right direction and help put some life back in those big plans of yours. Why not start rebuilding your retirement dreams with the principal?
Guys, the blue goes on the left.
Getting ready for the big game? Bring it. Bounty Extra Soft. The Bounty with a little extra softness. It's super absorbent, and it works extra hard for your money. In this lab demo, 1 sheet of Bounty Extra Soft outscrubs 2 sheets of the bargain brand. Game on. Bounty Extra Soft. Look for new prints.
CNN next. Campbell Brown, a voice of reason. Persistent, quick, sharp. Brown's reporting is worth cheering. Campbell Brown, your 8 p.m. alternative. Next on CNN, the worldwide leader in news.
Your loved one goes into cardiac arrest. What if you had the power to stop the clock?
Another day cheating death. CNN Saturday and Sunday night, 8 Eastern.
Well, we're here at Pioneer Supermarket. The majority of my customers are all familiar because they've been coming here for years. They have been telling me how much they're struggling. When they come to shop, the majority of them bring notepads and calculators because they're working on a budget. When we heard that Washington wanted to put the taxes on the juice drinks and the sodas, we just felt that this is another way to get into our pockets. New York cannot afford another tax.
Re-envisioned, reorganized, reactivated, all designed to reignite the soul. The all-new 2010 SRX, the Cadillac of crossovers.
Experience the all-new SRX during premier events. Future Cadillac dealer.
Brian Report in America this Wednesday and Thursday night, 9 Eastern.
We are back now with our panel, Ron Christie, Miguel Perez, Errol Lewis, and Robert Zimmerman. You know, I'd like to actually bring up some comments that General Stanley McChrystal has said recently, and he said that inadequate resources in Afghanistan would result in failure. I mean, we're hearing a very strong message from the commander in the field. Ron, your thoughts on this as it dovetails with the debate that's happening nationally?
I'm very concerned, Kitty. I think when you have an expert in counterinsurgency, which we have in General McChrystal, who has indicated that we need at least 40,000 troops to succeed in our mission of defeating the Taliban and making sure al-Qaeda doesn't resurge, I'm very concerned. And the last thing I'd say to that is, Why haven't we heard from the general before the United States Congress? Over the last 8 years, the Bush administration has had its wartime generals up before Congress, and they've had the opportunity to testify. I want to know, why haven't we had the same level of engagement with Barack Obama and his generals right now?
It certainly seems like a timely thing to happen.
Well, I think one of the things that has to go on here is that we need a new counterinsurgency doctrine. You know, the counterinsurgency manual that really led to the successful surge strategy in Iraq assumes a certain level of stability. It assumes a certain kind of credibility that the central government has, or at least the different factions of it have, that is just absolutely lacking in Afghanistan and has been lacking for centuries. So we have to rethink this whole thing, and it's not something you can do by committee in Congress with a harshly divided Congress. Not going to happen.
Miguel?
Failure is not an option, though. I mean, you know, what we have to do is figure out a way to keep the Taliban out of power. Maybe victory is not an option either, but we definitely need to be in Afghanistan, at least until we know that another terrorist movement is not going to arise out of there and hurt us.
Yeah, there's a real debate here to be had about our role in Afghanistan. Obviously, General McChrystal has a right to, certainly has an important role to play here, but the reason we have a civilian control of our military is because before we commit our troops to what we call counterinsurgency, which in fact is nation building, which means we're going to be there for at least a decade with tens of thousands of troops, because remember, Afghanistan consists of tens of thousands of villages throughout the country. And we have a government that is known for its corruption. So how do we engage effectively in fighting al-Qaeda and its terrorist allies if we don't have a working partner in Afghanistan to do it?
Very good points. Thank you very much. Ron Christie, Robert Zimmerman, Miguel Perez, and Errol Lewis. Thank you. Coming up at the top of the hour, Rick Sanchez in for Campbell Brown. Rick.